My parents missed my graduation because my mother said she had a panic attack and needed to be hospitalized. But a nurse who's a family friend sent me a screenshot showing that she was getting facial harmonization procedures done at an aesthetic clinic. I stood there in my cap and gown, phone in one hand, diploma in the other, watching my mother's face on Instagram stories from Elite Aesthetics Portland, smiling with ice packs on her cheeks, hashtagging Blessed Life and Self-Care Sunday. The auditorium was emptying around me, families taking photos, parents crying with pride, and I was staring at proof that my mother had lied about being in the emergency room to get Botox and fillers instead of watching me walk across that stage. My father had called 3 hours before the ceremony, his voice tight with practiced concern, explaining that Mom had suffered a severe panic attack at breakfast, and they were rushing to the hospital. He promised they would make it if possible, but her health had to come first. Surely I understood. I had understood, had felt guilty for even feeling disappointed, had told my roommate Emma that family emergencies happen, and at least I would still graduate. Emma had squeezed my hand and offered to take extra photos, her own parents already seated in the third row, holding a sign with my name on it because they knew mine would not be there. The screenshot came from Lisa Chen, a nurse who had worked with my father at Providence Portland Medical Center for 15 years before moving to private practice. Her message was simple. Rebecca, I'm so sorry, but I thought you should know the truth. Your mother checked into Elite Aesthetics this morning for facial harmonization procedures. She's been posting about it on her private Instagram. I have screenshots if you need them. Lisa had attached 3 images. My mother's Instagram stories showing her in the clinic's luxury waiting room, another of her consultation with Dr. Reeves, and a final one of her post-procedure, ice packs arranged artfully on her face, caption reading, "Finally doing something for me. Sometimes you have to prioritize self-care over everything else." I had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in psychology, had spent 4 years studying human behavior and manipulation, had written my thesis on narcissistic personality patterns in family systems. Every case study I had analyzed, every research paper I had devoured, suddenly felt like it had been preparing me for this exact moment of clarity. My mother had not just chosen a cosmetic procedure over my graduation. She had orchestrated an elaborate lie, involved my father in the deception, and posted about it publicly while pretending to be in a hospital emergency room. The calculation behind it was breathtaking in its cruelty. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Mom is stable now, but they want to keep her for observation. So proud of you, sweetheart. We'll celebrate this weekend." The ease of his lie, the practiced tone of his message, told me this was not the first time they had done something like this. I thought about my high school graduation, which they had left early claiming my mother felt faint. My piano recital at 16, which they had missed because of her migraine. My acceptance into Reed College, which should have been celebrated but was overshadowed by her need for a spa weekend to recover from the stress of my college applications. Emma appeared at my side, her parents trailing behind with congratulatory smiles that faltered when they saw my face. "Rebecca, what's wrong? Did something happen with your mom?" I looked up from my phone, and instead of tears or anger, I felt something cold and clear settle into my chest, like a key turning in a lock. I smiled at Emma, at her concerned parents, at the scattered groups of celebrating families around us. Actually, everything is perfect. My mom just sent me the most interesting message about her recovery. I forwarded Lisa's screenshots to my own phone, backed them up to 3 separate cloud accounts, and took careful notes of the timestamp, the clinic's location, and every visible detail in those Instagram stories. My mother had made a mistake that she did not yet understand. She had forgotten that I had spent 4 years learning exactly how people like her operate, and more importantly, how to dismantle them. That evening, I sat in my apartment with Emma and carefully constructed my response. My father called twice, but I let it go to voicemail, listening to his increasingly worried messages about why I was not answering. The third time he called, I picked up, keeping my voice light and understanding. "Sorry, Dad. The ceremony ran long, and then we went to dinner. How is Mom doing?" The relief in his voice was audible as he launched into elaborate details about her panic attack, the hospital staff, the tests they were running. I took notes, documenting every lie, every fabricated detail he provided. When he finished, I asked innocently, "Which hospital did you take her to? I want to send flowers." The pause was barely perceptible, but I caught it. Providence, Portland, he said finally. But they moved her to a private recovery room, so no flowers yet. Maybe wait until she comes home tomorrow? I thanked him, told him I loved them both, and hung up. Then I called Lisa Chen. I need everything, I told her. Every screenshot, every timestamp, and I need to know if my mother is actually listed as a patient at Providence, Portland today. Lisa's voice was grim when she responded. Rebecca, I already checked. Your mother is not and has never been a patient here today. I'm texting you everything I have right now. Over the next 3 days, while my parents maintained their fiction about my mother's recovery, I built a comprehensive timeline of their deception. Lisa provided not just the Instagram screenshots, but also her personal knowledge that my mother had been planning this procedure for months, had consulted with Dr. Reeves multiple times, and had specifically scheduled it for my graduation weekend. She told the clinic staff she wanted that date because her husband would be free to drive her home, Lisa explained during our coffee meeting on Tuesday. She laughed about finally having a weekend without family obligations. I discovered that the facial harmonization procedure my mother had received cost $8,500, paid from their joint account 3 weeks earlier. I found her private Instagram account, which she thought I did not know about, where she posted regularly about her aesthetic procedures, her shopping trips, her lunch dates with friends, all carefully hidden from me behind privacy settings. She had 237 followers, mostly women from her social circle, and they commented enthusiastically on her posts about self-care and treating yourself and putting your own needs first. On graduation day, while I walked across that stage, 17 people had commented on her clinic photos with supportive messages about her bravery for prioritizing herself. My mother called Wednesday evening, her voice slightly muffled from the procedure, asking if I wanted to come to dinner on Saturday to celebrate my graduation. I'm finally feeling better, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Dad told me the ceremony was beautiful. I'm so sorry we missed it, honey, but you know how these panic attacks can be. I agreed to Saturday dinner, confirmed the time, and told her I was looking forward to celebrating with them. After we hung up, I made 3 phone calls. One to Reed College's communications office, one to the Portland Tribune's education reporter who had covered our graduation, and one to my mother's sister, my Aunt Jennifer, who had always suspected my mother's patterns but never had proof. The Portland Tribune reporter, Amanda Rothschild, was interested immediately. Family dynamics and achievement sabotage make compelling human interest stories, she said carefully. But I would need substantial documentation, and you would need to be willing to go on record. I sent her everything: the screenshots, the timeline, my father's text messages, the financial records showing the procedure payment coinciding with graduation day, and my own statement about patterns of absence throughout my academic career. Amanda called back within 2 hours. Rebecca, this is actually newsworthy beyond just family drama. There has been increasing discussion about parental narcissism and achievement sabotage in academic communities. Would you be willing to be interviewed? Aunt Jennifer cried when I showed her the evidence. I have watched your mother do this to you your entire life, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Every achievement you had, she found a way to make it about her, to diminish it, to be unavailable. Your grandmother saw it too before she passed. She changed her will because of it. Did you know that? I had not known. Jennifer explained that my grandmother had left me a trust fund accessible at graduation, specifically structured to bypass my parents, because she had watched my mother's pattern of sabotage and wanted to ensure I had resources she could not control or diminish. The trust contained $42,000, enough to pay off my student loans and start my graduate program debt-free. Saturday approached, and I prepared for dinner with the same careful attention I had given to my thesis defense. I had documentation printed and organized, I had witnesses prepared, and I had one final piece of evidence to collect. Friday afternoon, I went to Elite Aesthetics Portland and requested copies of my mother's consent forms and payment receipts under the pretense of being her daughter settling her account. The receptionist, young and eager to be helpful, provided everything without question, including the consultation notes where my mother had specifically requested that date because, quote, "It's the only weekend my husband and I are both completely free." Emma watched me organize everything Friday night, her expression shifting from concern to something like awe. "You are really going to do this?" she said. It was not a question. I looked up from the carefully arranged documents, the printed screenshots, the timeline I had constructed with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. My mother made a choice, I said quietly. She chose her face over watching me graduate. She lied about a medical emergency. She involved my father in the deception. She posted about it publicly while I stood alone in that auditorium. Yes, Emma, I am really going to do this. Saturday dinner was scheduled for 6 p.m. at my parents' house, the same house where I had grown up, where I had studied for every test, where I had cried over college applications while my mother scheduled spa appointments. I arrived at 5:45 with a leather portfolio containing every piece of evidence I had collected, backup copies stored in 3 separate cloud accounts, and Amanda Rothschild from the Tribune parked 2 blocks away with my permission to arrive at 7 p.m. for what I had described as a surprise graduation celebration interview. My mother answered the door with her face still slightly swollen despite the concealer, her smile bright and artificial. Rebecca, sweetheart, come in. I have made your favorite dinner, that chicken piccata you love. She hugged me carefully, protecting her face, and I felt nothing but cold clarity. My father emerged from his study, jovial and relieved, clearly believing they had successfully maintained their lie. There's our graduate, he said, reaching for a hug I did not quite return. Summa cum laude, we're so incredibly proud. We sat down to dinner, an elaborate spread that my mother had clearly ordered catered despite her claims of cooking, and they asked carefully constructed questions about the ceremony they had not attended. What had the keynote speaker discussed? Had I taken photos with my professors? Had many families attended? I answered each question with deliberate detail, watching them squirm slightly at the reminder of what they had missed, what they had chosen to miss. My mother refilled wine glasses with shaking hands, the tremor barely visible but present, a tell I had learned to read years ago that meant she was nervous about something. Halfway through the main course, I set down my fork and pulled out my phone. Mom, I wanted to show you something interesting that happened on graduation day. I opened Instagram to her private account, the one she thought I did not follow, and turned the screen toward her. The color drained from her face as she stared at her own posts from Elite Aesthetics Portland, the timestamps clearly visible, the captions about self-care and prioritizing herself displayed in her own words. My father froze mid-bite, his fork suspended in the air, his eyes moving from the phone to my mother's face to my expression of calm neutrality. Rebecca, I can explain, my mother started, but I held up one hand to stop her. Please do not insult both of us with another lie. I have screenshots from Lisa Chen, who works at Providence, Portland, and confirmed you were never admitted there. I have your consultation notes from Elite Aesthetics showing you specifically requested my graduation date because it was convenient for your schedule. I have Dad's text messages claiming you were hospitalized. I have credit card receipts showing an $8,500 payment for facial harmonization procedures. I have everything, actually. I opened my portfolio and spread the documents across the dinner table, covering the catered food with evidence of their deception. Consultation notes, financial records, Instagram screenshots with timestamps, the text message history, Lisa's sworn statement about checking hospital records, even the receptionist's notes about my mother's comment regarding being free that weekend. My mother's face went from white to red, her carefully injected features struggling to form expressions of defense or denial. My father pushed back from the table slightly, his lawyer instincts clearly calculating how bad this could become. I had been planning that procedure for months, my mother said finally, her voice defensive and sharp. You don't understand the pressure women my age face, the judgment, the expectations. I needed this for myself. Her words hung in the air, and I let the silence extend until it became unbearable. You needed facial injections more than you needed to watch your only daughter graduate summa cum laude from Reed College, I said quietly. You needed Botox more than you needed to be there when I walked across that stage after 4 years of work. You needed to post about self-care on Instagram more than you needed to show up for the most important day of my academic life. My father tried a different approach, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used in business negotiations. Rebecca, your mother has struggled with anxiety and self-esteem issues for years. This procedure was therapeutic for her mental health. We made a difficult choice, but we did what we thought was best. I turned to him with the full weight of my psychology degree and 4 years of studying manipulation tactics. Dad, you texted me from Elite Aesthetics parking lot pretending to be at Providence, Portland. You fabricated details about hospital tests and recovery rooms. You are not a passive participant here. You are an active accomplice in a calculated deception. I pulled out my laptop and opened a video file. I also went back through home videos from the past 10 years. Would you like to see the compilation I made? High school graduation where Mom left early claiming she felt faint, but I found footage of her at dinner with friends 2 hours later posting about wine night. My piano recital where she had a migraine, except she was tagged at a shopping mall that same evening. My college acceptance celebration that got canceled for her spa weekend, which she documented extensively on Facebook. Should I continue? My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. How dare you investigate me like I'm some kind of criminal? I am your mother. I have sacrificed everything for you. Her voice was rising, the carefully constructed maternal facade cracking to reveal something uglier beneath. What sacrifices exactly? I asked, my voice level and clinical. The sacrifice of showing up? The sacrifice of being present? The sacrifice of putting your child's achievements before your own vanity? I stood as well, gathering my documents. I'm not here to reconcile or understand. I am here to inform you of consequences. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m., and I walked past my stunned parents to answer it. Amanda Rothschild stood on the porch with a photographer, her press credentials visible, her expression professionally neutral. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, I'm Amanda Rothschild from the Portland Tribune. I'm here to interview your daughter about her graduation and family dynamics for our education series. Rebecca mentioned this was a celebratory dinner where we could discuss achievement and parental support in academic success. May we come in? My mother's face transformed into a mask of horror as she realized what was happening. The photographer was already taking shots of the dinner table covered in evidence, of the expensive catered food, of the cream-colored walls lined with family photos that suddenly looked like exhibits in a case study of narcissistic parenting. My father moved toward the door, his hand outstretched as if to physically block them. This is a private residence. You need to leave immediately. Amanda's smile was polite but firm. Actually, Rebecca invited us, and this is a human interest story about academic achievement and family dynamics that our education editor found compelling enough to fast-track. We have been researching parental sabotage of children's accomplishments, and your daughter's documented case is particularly well evidenced. We can conduct the interview here or elsewhere, but the story is running either way. Rebecca has provided substantial documentation. I turned to my parents, watching their faces cycle through denial, anger, and dawning realization. Here is what is going to happen, I said calmly. Amanda is going to interview me about patterns of parental narcissism and achievement sabotage. The article will include anonymized details unless you force me to go fully public, in which case I have no problem using names. Your friends, your social circle, your colleagues are all going to read about a mother who chose cosmetic procedures over her daughter's college graduation. They are going to see the Instagram posts, the lies, the pattern of absence. My mother lunged toward me, but my father caught her arm. "You vindictive little bitch," she hissed, all pretense of maternal warmth evaporating. "After everything I have done for you, this is how you repay me? By humiliating me publicly?" I met her eyes without flinching. "You humiliated yourself. I am simply documenting it. There is a difference." Amanda set up her recording equipment in my parents' living room, while the photographer documented everything with the methodical precision of someone building a visual narrative. My mother had locked herself in the master bedroom, her muffled sobbing audible through the door, while my father sat rigid on the couch, his lawyer brain clearly working through every possible legal avenue to stop what was happening. I sat across from Amanda in the same chair where I had spent countless evenings studying, where I had filled out college applications, where I had cried alone after every missed event and broken promise. "Rebecca, let's start with graduation day," Amanda began, her recorder between us. "Walk me through what you were told and what actually happened." I recounted everything in clinical detail. My father's call 3 hours before the ceremony, the fabricated emergency room story, standing alone in my cap and gown while families celebrated around me, receiving Lisa's screenshots showing my mother at Elite Aesthetics. Amanda's expression remained professionally neutral, but I saw her exchange a glance with the photographer when I described finding my mother's Instagram posts, hashtagged with self-care Sunday while I waited for them to arrive. My father finally spoke, his voice strained. "We can write you a check. Name your price. Just stop this interview." I turned to him slowly. "You think this is about money? You think you can pay me to forget that you missed my graduation for Botox? Dad, I have a trust fund from Grandma that you did not even know about. I don't need your money. I need you to understand that actions have consequences." Amanda looked between us. "Mr. Morrison, are you attempting to bribe your daughter to suppress a factual account of events?" The photographer captured my father's face at that exact moment. The realization that he had just made everything exponentially worse by offering money in front of a journalist. He stood abruptly. "This interview is over. You need to leave my house now." Amanda checked her notes. "Actually, Rebecca is an adult who invited us to document a story about her graduation experience. Unless you are physically removing us, which would constitute assault and make for a very different kind of article, we are going to continue." I pulled out additional documentation I had not yet shown my parents. Emails between my mother and her aesthetic clinic dating back 6 months, showing she had been planning this procedure specifically for graduation weekend. One email was particularly damning. My mother asking if the recovery time would prevent her from attending a charity gala the following weekend, with the clinic assuring her the swelling would be minimal by then. She was more concerned about appearing at a social event 1 week later than she was about missing my graduation, I explained to Amanda. The charity gala was non-negotiable. My college graduation was expendable. The bedroom door finally opened and my mother emerged, her face tear-streaked and puffy beneath the fading bruises from her procedure. She had clearly been listening to the interview because she came out swinging. "You want to destroy me over one mistake? One day where I prioritized myself for once in my life?" Her voice was shrill, defensive, all previous attempts at maternal warmth abandoned. "I have given you everything, Rebecca. I sacrificed my career to raise you. I drove you to every activity, every appointment. And this is how you repay me?" I opened my laptop again and pulled up a spreadsheet I had created, color-coded and detailed. "Let's talk about sacrifice, Mom. This is a timeline of every major event in my life for the past 10 years. The screen showed a meticulous record. My high school graduation marked in red with her absence noted. My piano recital marked in red with her migraine excuse documented alongside her dinner reservations that same night. My debate team championship marked in red with her girls' weekend to wine country detailed with receipts. Red means you were absent or left early. Blue means you were present and engaged. Would you like to guess the ratio?" Amanda leaned forward to see the spreadsheet, and I watched her expression shift from professional interest to genuine shock. Out of 37 major events spanning 10 years, my mother had been present and engaged for 9. She had missed or left early from 28. The pattern was so clear, so documented, that no amount of explanation could diminish it. "Mrs. Morrison," Amanda said carefully, "how do you respond to this documented pattern of absence from your daughter's significant life events?" My mother's face cycled through several emotions before settling on righteous indignation. "This is taken completely out of context. Rebecca does not understand the pressures I was under, the migraines, the anxiety, the demands of maintaining a household." She gestured around the immaculate living room, the expensive furniture, the art on the walls. "I created a beautiful home for her. I made sure she had everything she needed. If I missed a few events because of my health, that does not make me a villain." I stood and walked to the mantel where family photos were carefully arranged. I picked up a frame from my high school graduation, the one where I stood alone in my cap and gown because my mother had left early. Behind it was another photo from that same day, my mother at dinner with friends, wine glass raised, smiling broadly, posted to Facebook with the caption "Celebrating Freedom." I had found it years later, stumbled across it while looking for graduation photos, and realized she had not been sick at all. "Explain this," I said, holding both photos side by side for Amanda's photographer. My father made one final attempt at control. "Rebecca, if you publish this article, you are never welcome in this house again. You will be cut off completely. No family events, no holidays, no relationship whatsoever. Is that really what you want?" I turned to him with 4 years of psychology training and a lifetime of analyzing their manipulation tactics informing my response. "Dad, you are offering to cut me off from something I never actually had? You are threatening to withdraw a relationship that was always conditional, always dependent on my silence about your and Mom's behavior. The only thing I am losing is the illusion that I had parents who cared about my achievements more than their own comfort. Amanda finished her notes and looked at my parents directly. I have enough for the article. It will run in next Sunday's education section with the headline, When Parents Miss Graduation, One Student's Story of Achievement Sabotage. Rebecca has agreed to use her full name. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, you have the option to provide a statement for inclusion, or the article will note that you declined to comment. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother sank onto the couch, her face in her hands, while my father stared at me with something that looked like hatred mixed with disbelief. I gathered my documents and my laptop, leaving the evidence spread across their dinner table like a crime scene waiting to be processed. As I reached the door, I turned back one final time. I graduated summa cum laude from Reed College with a degree in psychology. I wrote my thesis on narcissistic family systems and achievement sabotage. Everything you did to me, every absence, every lie, every manipulation became research material. You turned my childhood into a case study, and now that case study is going public. That's the actual consequence of your choices. The article ran the following Sunday with a photo of me in my graduation cap and gown, standing alone, contrasted with my mother's Instagram post from Elite Aesthetics on the same day. Amanda had written a devastating piece that combined my personal account with expert commentary from family psychologists about patterns of narcissistic parenting and achievement sabotage. The online version included redacted screenshots showing the timeline of deception, and within 6 hours of publication, it had been shared 43,000 times across social media platforms. My mother's private Instagram account was no longer private by Monday morning. Someone in her social circle had connected the dots from Amanda's article and shared her account widely, exposing years of posts about prioritizing herself, treating herself, and choosing self-care over family obligations. The comment section became a public reckoning as people dug through her history and found posts from every major event she had missed, each one captioned with some variation of "needed this day for myself." Her 237 followers became 2,000 critics, documenting her pattern of narcissism in real time. The Portland community was smaller than my parents had realized, and news traveled through their social circles with devastating speed. My father's colleagues at Providence Portland Medical Center saw the article, and multiple people came forward with their own observations about my mother's behavior at hospital events. Her tendency to dominate conversations, her habit of diminishing others' achievements while highlighting her own minor inconveniences. The charitable organizations where my mother served on boards received copies of the article from concerned donors, questioning whether someone who missed her own daughter's graduation for cosmetic procedures should be representing their family-focused missions. Wednesday morning, I received a call from my mother's sister, Aunt Jennifer, who was laughing and crying simultaneously. "Rebecca, you magnificent girl. 3 of your mother's board positions just asked her to resign. The junior league dropped her. The hospital auxiliary told her they were restructuring and her position was no longer needed. Her best friend Marcia called me to say she always knew Patricia was self-centered, but never realized how bad it was." Jennifer's voice grew serious. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you. She knew Patricia was like this, tried to warn me for years. That's why she structured your trust fund the way she did." My parents attempted damage control through their attorney, sending a cease and desist letter to the Tribune claiming defamation. The newspaper's legal team responded with a detailed accounting of every fact check they had performed, every document they had verified, and every expert source they had consulted. The letter concluded with a paragraph noting that truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims, and suggesting that further legal action would only generate additional news coverage. My parents' lawyer apparently agreed, because no lawsuit was ever filed. The fallout extended beyond social consequences into professional ones. My father's medical practice began receiving negative reviews referencing the article, patients questioning whether a doctor who lied to his own daughter about emergencies could be trusted with their care. The hospital administration called him in for a meeting about professionalism and integrity, and while he kept his position, he was removed from several prominent committees. His reputation as a trusted physician with impeccable character was permanently tarnished by the detailed documentation of his lies. My mother's response was to double down on victimhood, posting a long statement on Facebook about cancel culture and how one mistake was being blown out of proportion by a vindictive daughter who did not understand her struggles with mental health. The post received over 800 comments, but not the supportive ones she expected. Instead, people systematically dismantled her claims using evidence from the article, pointing out that a 6-month planned cosmetic procedure was not one mistake, but a deliberate choice. That anxiety and self-esteem issues did not excuse lying about medical emergencies, and that calling her daughter vindictive for telling the truth was further evidence of narcissistic behavior. I received messages from dozens of people who shared similar experiences with narcissistic parents, thanking me for speaking publicly about achievement sabotage and parental manipulation. Several psychologists reached out asking permission to use my case in their research or teaching, noting that the documentation I had provided was unusually comprehensive and clearly illustrated textbook patterns of narcissistic family dynamics. A publisher contacted me about potentially expanding my thesis into a book about surviving and escaping narcissistic parenting structures. 3 weeks after the article's publication, my parents made one final attempt at reconciliation through a family meeting requested by their therapist. I agreed to meet them in the therapist's office with clear conditions. I would listen but not engage in emotional manipulation. I would not accept blame or guilt, and I was recording the session for my own protection. The therapist, Dr. Helen Vasquez, had clearly read the Tribune article and approached the session with obvious awareness of the family dynamics at play. My mother cried throughout, describing how destroyed she felt by my public exposure of her private struggles, how humiliated she was by the social consequences, how damaged her reputation had become. She kept using phrases like, "didn't deserve this," and "punishment doesn't fit the crime, and can't we just move past this as a family?" My father sat beside her, his jaw tight, his body language defensive, offering nothing in the way of genuine apology or accountability. Dr. Vasquez let them talk for 20 minutes before turning to me. "Rebecca, what would reconciliation look like for you?" I looked at my parents directly, both of them waiting for me to offer forgiveness or understanding or some pathway back to the family system where their behavior was tolerated and excused. "Reconciliation would require you to understand what you actually did," I said calmly. "You didn't just miss my graduation. You orchestrated a lie about a medical emergency, involved multiple people in that lie, and chose cosmetic procedures over being present for one of the most important days of my life. And that wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a 10-year pattern of prioritizing yourselves over my achievements." My mother interrupted. "But I've apologized. I've said I'm sorry. What more do you want from me?" I pulled out my phone and opened to a notes file. "You've apologized for my hurt feelings. You've apologized for the misunderstanding. You've apologized for the situation getting out of hand. You've never once apologized for lying about being hospitalized. You've never apologized for posting about self-care while I stood alone at graduation. You've never acknowledged that you deliberately chose that date despite knowing what it meant. Those are very different things." Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. "Patricia, David, what I'm hearing from Rebecca is that she's making a distinction between apologizing for consequences versus apologizing for choices. Can you understand that difference?" My father finally spoke, his voice cold. "What I understand is that our daughter humiliated us publicly, destroyed our reputations, and damaged our professional lives because she didn't get enough attention at her graduation. That's the reality of this situation." His words hung in the air, confirming everything I had already known. They were not sorry for what they did, only sorry they got caught. I stood up, gathering my things. "Dr. Vasquez, thank you for facilitating this, but I think we're done here. Mom, Dad, I hope you understand that this meeting was your last chance to demonstrate genuine remorse and accountability. Instead, you've shown me exactly who you are and what matters to you. My achievements will always be secondary to your image. My truth will always be labeled vindictiveness, and my boundaries will always be called punishment. I'm not interested in a relationship built on those terms." My mother's face crumpled, but my father's expression was pure fury, and I knew any remaining possibility of reconciliation had just evaporated. As I reached the door, Dr. Vasquez spoke quietly. "Rebecca, I want you to know that in 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen someone your age articulate boundaries and consequences this clearly. Whatever happens with your family, you've demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence and strength." I thanked her and left, walking out into bright May sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. 6 months after the Tribune article, I started graduate school at University of Washington for clinical psychology with a full scholarship and a research position, studying family systems and narcissistic parenting patterns. My thesis had evolved into a book proposal that 3 publishers were competing for, and I had been invited to speak at 2 national psychology conferences about achievement sabotage and parental manipulation. The trust fund from my grandmother had covered my undergraduate debt completely, and I was living in Seattle building a life that my parents had no access to and no influence over. My mother's social rehabilitation efforts had failed spectacularly. She had tried joining new organizations and social groups, but the Tribune article always preceded her, passed along by well-meaning members who thought others should know about her documented pattern of narcissistic behavior. Her Instagram account had been deleted after months of brutal comments, and she had retreated into increasing isolation. According to Aunt Jennifer, who maintained minimal contact, my mother spent most of her time at home, her elaborate social calendar empty, her carefully constructed image shattered beyond repair. My father's medical practice had stabilized but never recovered its previous prestige. He had lost approximately 30% of his patient base and was no longer invited to serve on hospital committees or boards. His reputation as someone who had lied about medical emergencies for personal convenience had permanently tarnished his professional standing in a community where trust was currency. Aunt Jennifer mentioned that he had aged dramatically, the stress of social and professional consequences visible in his face and posture. I received occasional messages from my parents, usually around holidays or my birthday, carefully worded attempts at reconnection that never acknowledged their behavior or offered genuine apologies. I did not respond. Dr. Vasquez had explained to me that narcissistic individuals rarely change because change requires admitting fault, and admitting fault threatens the carefully constructed image they have built their identity around. My parents' messages always focused on my vindictiveness or their suffering, never on their choices or lies or pattern of absence. They were exactly who they had always been, just with consequences they could not escape or manipulate away. Lisa Chen, the nurse who had sent me those initial screenshots, had become a friend and mentor. She told me that my willingness to speak publicly about parental narcissism had inspired 3 other young women in similar situations to establish boundaries with their own families, using my documentation methods as a template. "You turned your pain into a blueprint for others," Lisa said during one of our coffee meetings. "That's the opposite of what your parents did, which was turn everyone else's achievements into reasons to focus on themselves." The book came out 8 months later, co-authored with Dr. Samantha Price, a leading researcher in family psychology. We titled it Achievement Sabotage: Recognizing and Recovering from Narcissistic Parenting. And my story opened the first chapter with full documentation, photos, and timeline. The book became required reading in several graduate psychology programs and was featured on 3 national morning shows. My parents did not sue because their attorney had advised them that everything in the book was documented fact, and further legal action would only generate more publicity. I saw my mother once more, by accident, at a coffee shop in Portland during a visit to President Reed College. She was alone, looking older and smaller than I remembered, her face showing the effects of stress rather than the facial harmonization she had chosen over my graduation. She saw me too, and for a moment our eyes met across the crowded cafe. I watched her face cycle through surprise, hurt, and something that might have been shame before she looked away. I finished my coffee and left without approaching her, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about who she might have become if she had made different choices. My life in Seattle was full of genuine relationships built on mutual respect, rather than obligation or manipulation. Emma had moved to Seattle for law school, and we shared an apartment near campus. Tyler, who I had started dating during graduate school, understood boundaries and accountability in ways my parents never had. My research on narcissistic family systems was gaining national recognition, and I was scheduled to testify before a congressional committee about the long-term psychological effects of parental achievement sabotage. On what would have been my graduation anniversary, I posted a photo on my professional Instagram account, me in my Reed College cap and gown, alone, diploma in hand. The caption read, "2 years ago, my parents missed this moment because my mother chose facial harmonization procedures over attending my graduation, then lied about a medical emergency. Today, I'm a published author, graduate researcher, and advocate for others who survived narcissistic parenting." Some people spend their lives seeking validation from parents who will never provide it. I chose to build my own validation through achievement, boundaries, and truth. To everyone who has been sabotaged by family members who should have been celebrating you, your success is not diminished by their absence. It's proven by it. The post went viral with over 200,000 shares, and I received thousands of messages from people sharing their own stories of parental narcissism and achievement sabotage. Mental health organizations reached out about collaborating on awareness campaigns. Universities invited me to speak about recognizing and escaping toxic family dynamics. My parents' attempt to diminish my graduation had instead become the foundation for a career helping others recognize and escape the same patterns of manipulation. Aunt Jennifer called to tell me that my mother had seen the post and spent 3 days in bed afterward, devastated by the reminder of what she had sacrificed for vanity and the permanent consequences of her choices. My father had apparently told Jennifer that they should have handled things differently, the closest he had ever come to acknowledging fault. But differently was not the same as apologizing, and should have was not the same as taking accountability. They remained exactly who they had always been, just with fewer people willing to enable or excuse their behavior. I graduated with my master's degree 2 years after that Reed College ceremony my parents had missed, and this time the auditorium was filled with people who had chosen to be there. Emma and Tyler and Aunt Jennifer and Lisa Chen and Dr. Price and colleagues from my research program and friends I had made in Seattle who valued achievement and supported success. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I looked out at faces that were smiling with genuine pride, and I understood completely that this was what family was supposed to look like. Not people connected by genetics or obligation, but people who showed up when it mattered because your success brought them joy rather than threatening their image. My parents sent a card that arrived 2 weeks late with a check inside and a note saying they were proud of me despite everything. I donated the check to a nonprofit supporting survivors of family narcissistic abuse and threw the card away. Pride, despite everything, meant they still believed I had done something wrong by telling the truth, that my boundaries were punishments, that their consequences were my vindictiveness. They had learned nothing, changed nothing, and I had stopped expecting anything different. The final chapter of my book ended with a line that had become something of a manifesto for survivors of narcissistic parenting. They will call your truth vindictiveness. They will call your boundaries cruelty. They will call your consequences unfair. Let them. Your achievement does not require their presence, your success does not need their validation, and your healing does not depend on their approval. You are not destroying the family by speaking the truth. You are simply refusing to maintain the lie. It was the lesson I had learned standing alone in my graduation cap and gown, and it was the gift I could now offer to others still learning to choose themselves over the comfortable fiction of family harmony.